I'm the adopted son who fell from grace, the one the real heir drugged and framed at a party. To burn off the drug, I stumbled into the garden, grabbed the first guy I could find in the dark, and knocked him out cold. Later, at the dinner party meant to announce the engagement between the real heir and a business tycoon, I saw him again. The same guy. In front of everyone, he pointed at me and said flatly, "Fine, I'll agree to the marriage. But I want a different person. I want him, the guy I'd knocked out cold." Turns out he was a total knockout himself. He had incredible features, deep-set eyes, a sharp nose, and thin lips, all wrapped up in a cool, reserved vibe. The man woke up halfway through and figured out the situation in an instant. A smirk played on his lips as he wrapped a hand around my waist, his voice low and husky. Well, what do we have here, you little vixen, oof." I slapped him hard on his solid, muscular chest and leaned in, my hand on his throat. "Call me Daddy." His expression soured instantly. His brow furrowed and his voice turned to ice. "The game's over. No one has ever dared to be this insolent with me, hiss." The drug must have been hitting hard, because my courage was through the roof. Luckily, I'd already used his tie to blindfold him and bind his hands. I've been around the block a few times. I had plenty of ways to make him see red and beg to call me Daddy. I just didn't expect that when he fought back, he'd be the one who seemed like he was on something. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. The drug was wearing off and dawn was breaking. Ignoring his pleas for another round, I shoved a check in his pocket, patted his cheek and said, "I'm done. See you never." I disappeared from the party for a whole night, but when I got home, no one even asked where I'd been. Ever since my parents found Steven, their biological son, I'd become the unwanted replacement. The parents who once doted on me now looked at me with nothing but disgust, as if I were a criminal. The more they learned about Steven's tough childhood, the more they hated me. It was as if I'd stolen his place and caused all his misfortune. But it was their mistake that led to him getting lost and them thinking he'd drowned. After my mother fell into a deep depression, my father adopted me from a foster home. I was only 8. He led me into the house and said, "Alex, from now on, this is your home. We're your mom and dad, and we'll treat you like our own son and love you forever." I was a cheerful, charming kid, and I managed to bring laughter back into their quiet, sad home. I was an abandoned child, left at the steps of the orphanage. I never expected much from the idea of family. A meal and a bed was a home. It didn't matter if no one wanted me, I could survive anywhere. But the shepherds gave me a real family, and now they were taking it all back. I had nothing to say, but their hatred for me and Steven's felt completely out of the blue. The family that adopted Steven wasn't terrible. They were honest, hardworking farmers with a house and land back home. Even though they already had 2 kids, they saved Steven, adopted him, and put him through college. But after returning to the shepherds, Steven only ever talked about pleasing his birth parents, never mentioning the family who raised him. When I heard my parents had found their son and were bringing him home, I was happy for them. I even planned on throwing him a welcome party. But before I could even walk into the study, I overheard my parents talking. "Steven is such a good, obedient boy. What if Alex can't accept him and bullies him? He's not really close to us yet, so he probably wouldn't even tell us if he was being picked on. It won't be that bad. Alex can be a bit wild, but he knows where to draw the line. Now that Steven's back, he should understand who the real shepherd heir is. I'm telling you, Steven suffered so much out there. You can't play favorites. Make sure you get everything ready for him, the car, the house, don't miss a thing. He's our own flesh and blood. You need to be smart about how the family assets will be divided in the future. I know, don't worry. I've already got it all planned out. Thank God we found Steven. At least the shepherd fortune won't fall into the hands of an outsider." I didn't stick around to hear the rest. There was no point. It wasn't until I met Steven that I understood my parents' sudden wariness of me wasn't baseless. He played the part of a deeply insecure and timid boy, completely out of his element in this new home. But he'd also sneak into my room. When I caught him, he'd glare at me, full of resentment. "Your room? This was supposed to be my room, wasn't it? You thief. From the moment I came to this family, I knew I was just a replacement for their deceased son, Alex. I'd lived with that name and identity for over 20 years without a problem. Now that he was back, was I supposed to just tuck my tail between my legs because he couldn't stand me acting like a shepherd and enjoying everything they'd given me? Look, I'll take whatever the shepherds give me, and if they kick me out, I'll accept that too. I never planned on fighting Stephen for anything, let alone trying to hurt him. The way he bared his teeth at me reminded me of my Maine Coon cat. I just figured he was stressed out in a new environment, so I let it slide. I never thought he'd drug me at a party to humiliate me and get my parents to kick me out. But he seriously underestimated me. As one of the most notorious playboys in our circle, if he wanted to frame me, he'd better be prepared for who would end up pinned down and crying daddy. After the party, he was probably worried I'd snitch, so he started pulling all sorts of stunts to frame me. It came to a head when he pretended to hand me a piece of fruit, then tripped and threw himself into the swimming pool, landing himself in the hospital. He finally succeeded in making my parents furious with me. Stephen had a fear of water ever since he almost drowned as a child. It was a brilliant move. My mother slapped me across the face. I know you're upset that Stephen is back, but you're both my sons. I've turned a blind eye this past week, but what did you just do? What are you trying to accomplish? Wasn't it enough that my son died once? Do you have to keep stabbing me in the heart? I figured this was it. I couldn't stay in this house any longer. But before I could pack my things, my father called me into the study. Dad, don't yell at me. You should go be with Mom. She looks like she's about to faint. Besides, you won't believe anything I say right now. I believe you. I was stunned, thinking I must have misheard him. It turned out my father had been secretly watching both of us all week. He was suspicious of me at first, but then he started noticing Stephen's strange behavior. But even so, he just made excuses for Stephen, blaming himself for everything. I owe it to him. Stephen has been through so much. He's acting this way because he's scared. Alex, you have to understand. You're both my children. Pains me that he would do something like this. What could I do? My dad was practically on his knees, begging me to forgive him. The man in front of me had raised me for over a decade, giving me a life of wealth and privilege. I had no choice but to say, just make him stay away from me. I see you guys as my parents, and I don't care how you treat me, but I don't owe him anything. My father promised me over and over that it wouldn't happen again and that he'd discipline Stephen properly once he was out of the hospital. A few days later, news came that my parents had arranged a marriage for Stephen with the prestigious Julian family from the neighboring city. With the Julians' protection and the shepherd's backing, it was clear just how much they valued Stephen. Once the engagement was set, Stephen's spirits lifted instantly. His head didn't hurt, his back wasn't sore, and he even had the nerve to roll his eyes at me provocatively. You know, I actually feel sorry for you. You were my stand-in for so many years, but the second I come back, I'm the one Mom and Dad care about most. Go ahead. Keep parading around with the shepherd name. I don't care. A fake is still a fake. A fraud like you could never marry into a family like the Julians. Julian spends most of his time in the Americas, so I'd never met him, but I'd certainly heard of him. Forget the top-tier family background and business genius stuff. The guy was a psycho who played for both teams. A wolf in sheep's clothing with a gentlemanly facade. Even a seasoned player like myself knew to stay away from someone like Julian. As the dinner to discuss the engagement with the Julians drew closer, Stephen started parading in front of me even more. Faced with his constant showing off, all I could say was, "Good luck, you're in a whole different league now." The Julians were a deeply rooted, wealthy family, and they cared a lot about appearances. The engagement party was a massive affair. I hid in a corner of the ballroom with a bag of sunflower seeds, content to be a fly on the wall, just waiting for it to be over so I could go to my usual spot and have some fun. Amidst the buzz of the crowd, a man with a cool, stern face slowly descended the staircase. His eyes were lowered, and his lips were curled into a polite smile as he expertly handled the throng of people who rushed to greet him. Then he casually looked up. Our eyes met and my pupils dilated. Wait a second, why does he look so familiar? I saw him say "excuse me" to the people around him and start walking towards me. I was so scared I dropped my seeds and made a break for the door. But I didn't get more than 2 steps before a hand grabbed the back of my neck. A chill shot down my spine and straight to my head. His voice was deep and hypnotic as he said, word by word, Where are you running? Da? DDY. Even after 3 months of marriage, I still couldn't figure out how Julian had recognized me. And I had no idea what was wrong with him that he insisted on marrying me. In front of both the Julian and Shepherd families, he pointed right at me and said, cool as a cucumber, fine, I'll agree to the marriage. But I want a different person. I want him. Although the old Mr. Julian was still technically the head of the family, everyone knew Julian was the one who really called the shots. And since the Shepherds had called in an old family favor just to get this alliance, they weren't about to object. As for Stephen, he was sick in bed for a solid 2 weeks after that dinner. My parents didn't let me come home for that entire time, afraid I'd upset him. Once the wedding date was set, they practically gift-wrapped me and shipped me off to the Julian estate. The wedding was rushed, but it was still incredibly lavish. Both families' stock prices soared, solidifying their alliance as the most stable in the business world. Julian was an enigma, but surprisingly, he had a good temper. On our first night, I acted out all night long, but he didn't get angry or annoyed. And by acted out, I mean I invited all my ex-boyfriends over for an all-night rager at our house. I still remember it clearly. At the peak of the party, the noise suddenly died down. I turned around and saw him standing there, hands in the pockets of his perfectly tailored designer suit, which elegantly framed his broad shoulders and long legs. He was watching me with a regal air. Half of his face was speckled with the champagne I had just sprayed everywhere. Meeting his faint, unreadable smile, I sauntered over, stood on my toes, and slung an arm around his shoulder. What's up? Want to join the party? I was deliberately trying to piss him off. But to my surprise, Julian just wrapped an arm around my waist and smudged the champagne foam from his face onto the tip of my nose. Sweetie, I still have work to do. You just have fun. He casually took a glass of wine from a passing waiter, took a sip, gave a polite nod to the room and went upstairs. Damn, Alex, your man is something else. Yeah, for real. And he's hot, kinda looks like that one movie star. His body's probably only a little better than mine. Who the hell are you to compare yourself to Mr. Julian? Oh, Alex, now that you have a guy like him, you're not gonna ghost us, are you? Everyone started chattering at once, giving me a headache. Julian's reaction made the whole thing feel pointless. After I sent everyone home, I stormed upstairs and found his study. You, Julian, you can tolerate this? Those were all my ex-boyfriends. Julian looked up, leaned back in his chair, and raised an eyebrow non-committally. That's all in your past. Sweetie, don't you fucking sweetie me. I cut him off, grabbing his tie. Julian, neither of us is the settling down type. Being forced together like this is pointless. Either you go tell my parents we're getting a divorce, or we agree to do our own thing and stay out of each other's business. We were so close our noses were almost touching. Behind his gold-rimmed glasses, his narrow, dark eyes stared into mine, making my skin crawl for some reason. I was about to pull back when I realized Julian's hand had somehow snaked behind me. His long, strong fingers wrapped around the back of my neck, holding me in place and forcing my face closer to his. What do you think you're doing? Isn't this fun enough for you now, baby? It wasn't until the next day that I found out what Julian meant by fun. I woke up to find I'd been blacklisted from every club and bar in town. All my friends were avoiding me like the plague. I asked around and discovered that every single one of them had run into some minor, inconvenient trouble at work or in their personal lives, and all signs pointed to one source, Julian. I, Alex Shepherd, am not one to take things lying down. He got my favorite spots to blacklist me. I used my savings to open a gay bar right across from his company headquarters and offered a 40% discount to all his employees. He wouldn't let me party. I spread rumors everywhere that he couldn't get it up and ordered all sorts of self-help products online, delivered straight to his office under his full name. For 3 months, I fought and lost every time. Julian always managed to outmaneuver me with ease. To make matters worse, the Shepherds cut off my credit cards. I didn't even have to guess who tattled on me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. One night, I ambushed Julian as he came out of the shower, wearing nothing but a towel, and pushed him onto the bed. So I forced you once, hit you a dozen times, and made you call me daddy 50 or 60 times. Is that it, Julian? Did you marry me just to get revenge? Fine, you win. I handed him a small riding crop, flopped onto the bed, and squeezed my eyes shut. All right, go ahead. Whatever you want to do, I'll play along. After this, we're even. When nothing happened, I peeked one eye open and saw Julian frowning, his face dark. You really can't get it up, can you? The words were barely out of my mouth before Julian lunged. He grabbed the crop and, in a few swift moves, tied my wrists together above my head. His gaze was heavy as his warm fingertips traced over my eyes, finally settling on my lips. Just as I thought he was going to kiss me, he suddenly gripped my chin and sneered. Mr. Shepherd, is this how you solve all your problems? What do you mean? What makes you think this makes us even? Ha! Do you really think I'm that desperate to sleep with you? In my 20+ years, no one had ever dared to play me like this. A strange mix of shame and anger welled up inside me. I lifted my leg to kick him in the chest, but he was too fast. Julian grabbed my ankle and lifted my leg high. Mr. Shepherd, my patience has its limits. If you can't stand it, then let's get a divorce. Julian, you freak. I really regret ever messing with you that night. Julian's hand slid from my ankle up my thigh as he chuckled. Oh, you didn't seem to be calling me a freak that night when you were riding me so enthusiastically. He had a point. I was in the wrong there, so I gritted my teeth. Then what? What will it take for you to divorce me? You don't like me, and I don't like you. What's the point of all this? Julian's eyes darkened for a moment. Then a slow smile spread across his lips. Why don't you just fall for me? Bullshit. Ow. Are you a fucking dog? Of all places, you bite my handsome face. I never would have guessed Julian would lean down and bite my right cheek, leaving 2 faint teeth marks. He tilted my chin up, a lazy smile on his face. Maybe once you fall for me, I'll get bored. I mulled over Julian's words all night and decided to change my strategy. He was right. It was true for me, too. Men get bored with things they've already conquered. It's just how it works. And so, the next morning at breakfast, I piped up. Julian, I think I'm starting to like you. Julian continued eating his breakfast methodically, without looking up. Liar. Later, while Julian was working in his study, I peeked my head in. Julian, I've thought it over. I definitely like you. Get out. Okay. While Julian was in the shower, I knocked on the bathroom door. He turned off the water and asked, What is it? Julian, why don't you believe me? I swear to God, I really like you. Get lost. I had used every trick in my playbook to win Julian over, but he wasn't buying any of it. I know why. You don't believe me because you're not looking into my eyes. Julian, look into my eyes. Before I could get close, he slapped a hand over my face and pushed my head away. It would be more believable if you said you wanted to sleep with me than if you said you liked me. I was confused. I threw my hands up. What's the difference? With that, Julian kicked me out of the study and banned me from entering for a week. This was tough. Julian was officially the most difficult man I'd ever met. Desperate, I created a group chat with all my exes, dropped a huge cash gift from my remaining savings, and asked, How do you make a man believe you like him? Seconds after I sent the message, the chat blew up with dozens of replies. Who's the new target? Alex? Weird. Who does Alex even have to chase? Yeah, what an idiot. Unlike me. Alex, you just have to crook your finger and I'll come running. Forget him, Alex. Let's get back together. I put on more muscle recently, wanna see? You have no shame. If anyone's getting back together with him, it's me. I was before you, so follow the first dumped, first reunited rule. A flood of pics started pouring in, and within minutes, the group was shut down. Seriously, what kind of simple-minded, muscle-bound morons was I into before? Ugh. Thinking back, I did like them, I guess, but it was mostly just lust at first sight. When you live a life of luxury, you're never short on people who like you. It's easy to say I love you. I don't think I've ever truly, genuinely liked someone. Wait, that's not entirely true. In my messy romantic history, there was one boy I genuinely, purely liked. But he was straight. I couldn't turn him, and eventually, I scared him so much he transferred schools. After that, I let myself go wild. Why bother putting in the effort to like someone? Real feelings just get you hurt. Whatever. Thinking about how to make Julian believe I'm into him is a waste of time. I'd be better off binge watching some reality TV to work on my acting skills. I was engrossed in a variety show when my phone buzzed. I picked it up and saw a photo from an unknown number. It was Julian with his arm around another man, looking intimate as they walked into a hotel. Oh hell no. So it's one rule for him and another for me. Since he served this up on a silver platter, I was definitely going to use it. I threw some money around and quickly found out Julian's schedule for the day. When I showed up at the hotel with 2 bodyguards, sure enough, I saw Julian's assistant standing guard outside a room. WH, what are you doing here? I didn't waste time talking. I waved my hand, and the bodyguards grabbed the assistant. I pulled out the key card I'd already gotten my hands on. Before opening the door, I made sure to call old Mr. Julian and tell him I was divorcing his grandson today. The moment I opened the door, I heard a man's hoarse, angry voice. Didn't I fucking say no one was to come in? The room was pitch black. I could only make out the faint silhouette of a person inside. Weird, it looks like there's only one person. Fumbling for the light switch, I mustered up my courage. Julian, you have the nerve to do it, but you're afraid of people finding out? It's you? Just as my fingers found the switch, a powerful hand shot out of the darkness and grabbed me. The next thing I knew, my phone slipped from my grasp, and I was falling onto a soft mattress. You walked right into this one yourself. The man's hot breath ghosted across my neck. His body temperature was alarmingly high. I knew this state all too well. I struggled to push him off and scrambled to get away. But Julian's strength was insane. He grabbed me by the waist and threw me back onto the bed. You fucking psycho. Yeah, I'm a psycho, Julian mumbled, his kisses frantic and sloppy. The air grew thick and hot, my own body temperature rising with it. I was burning up, but Julian held me tight. Pushed him away, he pulled me back. I pushed again, he pulled me back again. After a few rounds, I was exhausted. I gave him a light kick. I need to take a fucking shower. Julian planted a kiss on my forehead and swept me into his arms. I'll help you. I was too weak to fight back. But thankfully, Julian was gentle and thorough, washing me clean. He even knelt on the floor to carefully dry my feet. I never knew you had such great customer service, Mr. Julian. What? Did you used to wait on your little boy toys like this too? I teased, planting my foot on his muscular chest. Julian chuckled, raising an eyebrow at me. If you're asking if I'm jealous, I can assure you the answer is no. Wait a second. Something clicked in my head. I bolted out of the bathroom. Sure enough, I found my phone wedged in a crack. The screen showed that the call had ended long ago, but the call duration was a full 2.5 hours. That day, Julian and I were summoned to the Julian family mansion for dinner. Throughout the meal, old Mr. Julian lectured his grandson, peppering him with scolding remarks. The gist of it was, take care of your health, practice some self-control, and stop talking about divorce over every little thing. As we were leaving, the old man pulled me aside conspiratorially and told me that if Julian ever upset me, I should tell him and he'd have my back. In the car, my face was beet red with embarrassment, but Julian acted as if nothing had happened. He poked my head. Was it really worth tattling to the old man over something so small? You could have just told me. Before I could answer, Julian reached into my jacket pocket and slipped in a black card. What the hell, Julian? What do you take me for? You don't want it? Fine. When he moved to take it back, I clutched my pocket. Why the hell wouldn't I want it? This is my compensation for emotional distress. Julian was suddenly in a great mood. He reached out, pinched my cheek, and smiled. Yes, you certainly suffered a lot of emotional distress. Go have some fun. My mind was already picturing myself hiring a male model to accompany me on an overseas trip, but Julian suddenly grabbed my face and warned me. I said have fun, not have fun with other men. I still wasn't sure what happened with him being drugged last night, but I still had that photo on my phone. I immediately pulled out my phone, shoved the picture in his face, and asked with a smug grin, "Mr. Julian, you can't have double standards. Since we can't get a divorce, I'm not interfering with your life. What right do you have to interfere with mine?" Julian stared for a long moment, his face instantly darkening. He sneered. "So, you stormed in here last night just to catch me in the act so you could complain to my grandfather and try to divorce me? Even now, you're using this picture as a bargaining chip, but it never once occurred to you to ask me who this person is, or what we were doing." Julian usually maintained a refined, gentlemanly demeanor, or he was as cunning as a fox. It was rare to see him this angry, and he'd never rattled off so many words at once. "Well, no. Does it have anything to do with me?" Julian's face grew even darker. He loosened his tie and suddenly pushed me down onto the back seat. "Do I need to remind you what our relationship is? Aren't we in a business marriage?" With a snap, Julian pulled our marriage certificate from his inner jacket pocket and threw it in front of me. "Bullshit. We are in a legally binding marriage. I'm warning you, I can't do anything about your past, and I've already dealt with mine." "Wait, this guy carries our marriage certificate around with him?" Seeing my stunned expression, he grabbed my face again and warned, "From now on, I'm the only man you're allowed to have." I'd never seen a reformed playboy try to drag someone down with him. Seeing the serious look on his face, I stammered, Are you serious?" He jutted his chin out, saying nothing, but his eyes were fixed on me, making my skin crawl. "Look, I know I'm charming as hell, but Julian, I'm not the settling down type. Even if I did fall for you, I can't promise I'll always like you, or only like you." I was being honest. If Julian was open to an open relationship, I wouldn't mind staying married. But if he was talking about real feelings, then let's be real, I don't know how to like anyone. Real, genuine feelings don't always give you an equal return of happiness. Sometimes they just give you double the pain. Julian let go of me, his expression unreadable. He said softly, "You're just as heartless as you've always been." What does that mean? The way he said it, it was like he'd known me for a long time. Before I could ask, he just threw out one last line. "Anyway, since we got married, I haven't touched anyone else. Divorce is not an option, and neither is seeing other men. You can either accept your fate or you can try to like me. Always like me and only like me." The situation had just gotten a lot more complicated. It seemed like Julian was serious. According to my own digging, he had indeed cleaned house after we got married, getting rid of all the men and women on the side. But what was more damning was that, in the process, I discovered something incredible. The women Julian had dated were all different types, but the men, they were all pretty much the same style. Baby-faced, clean-cut, with big eyes, fair skin, and slightly fluffy, naturally curly hair. They didn't look identical, but they were definitely all the same type. Wait a second. Even though I'm a player, I happen to have that exact kind of innocent-looking face. Damn it. Could Julian have known me a long time ago? Did I dump him? Is he still hung up on me? That can't be right. A guy with his credentials? If I dated him, I would definitely remember. Whatever. Instead of obsessing over this, I should figure out how to spend a ton of Julian's money with this new black card. There was a jade bead necklace at an auction that I really liked. My mother loves jade, so I planned to bid on it for her. What I didn't expect was that Steven would be there, and he was clearly trying to pick a fight with me. He must have had his eye on the same jade bracelet because he kept outbidding me. 5.6 million. Steven shot me a smug look. I thought for a moment and raised my paddle. 6 million. The words were barely out of my mouth when my phone rang. It was Julian. His voice on the other end was deep and indifferent. 10 million. I glanced around and, sure enough, saw Julian on the second-floor balcony. He gave me a nod and a little wave. "Are you crazy? You can't just throw money away like that." Julian chuckled. "I'm with a client, baby. If you keep bidding like that, people will think our family is going bankrupt." Since Julian had given me the green light, I went ahead and bid an absurd, rich idiot son price on that item and every single one that followed, winning them all. As soon as the auction ended, I was swarmed by people, and it took a lot of effort to schmooze my way out of there. Surprisingly, Steven wasn't angry at all. He even came over to greet me. "You're quite the big spender, Alex." "Can't help it, Steven. Mom and Dad supported me when I was at home, and now my husband supports me. Plus, I own a dozen or so clubs. I'm just used to spending money recklessly. It's a hard habit to break." A flash of malice crossed Steven's eyes. He leaned in, patted my shoulder, and sneered. "You've been playing the part of the young master for so long, you've forgotten who you really are, haven't you, Alex?" At the time, I thought Steven was just pissed off and trying to provoke me. It wasn't until that night, as I was leaving the Shepherd house and about to call my driver, that I bumped into someone. Actually, it wasn't a bump. The woman was clearly aiming for me. She grabbed my leg and, without a word, burst into tears. The streetlight here was broken, so I couldn't see her face, but I could hear her voice clearly. She called me Aaron. A sudden rage shot through me. I started shaking, trying to push her away, but she just clung to me tighter. "Ma'am, I don't know you. You have the wrong person. Please let go." "Aaron, I know I was wrong before, but you can't just forget about your real mom now that you have rich parents. I have nowhere else to go. Let go." I finally managed to shove her off and stumbled away, running from that place. This woman, she got pregnant out of wedlock, gave birth to me, then dumped me with my grandmother, telling me to call her sister, not mom. Later, when she was about to get married, she snatched me away from my grandmother and deliberately drove across state lines to dump me in an orphanage. For over 20 years, I had treated that brief memory as nothing more than a bad dream, a nightmare. But now that nightmare had found me again. Steven. It had to be Steven's doing. As I numbly started back towards the Shepherd house to confront him, a pair of blinding headlights flashed in front of me. I looked up. It was one of the Julian family cars. I didn't expect Julian to be here too. The window was halfway down, and he glanced at me, seeming to sense something was wrong. "What's wrong?" he asked, getting out of the car and hurrying to my side. "You were fine when you left. Did someone bother you?" When I didn't answer, Julian took my hand and started to head towards the Shepherd house. "No, I'm just tired. I want to go home and sleep." I quickly pulled him back. Seeing he still didn't believe me, I just opened my arms and said lazily,
"Julian, I'm exhausted.
"Carry me to the car." The man froze for a second, then a smile broke across his face. He swept me up into his arms, bridal style, and planted a kiss on my forehead. "Okay, let's go home." It turned out to be Steven's doing, just as I'd suspected. That woman had married a construction boss. They'd had a decent life for over a decade, but then the husband got hooked on gambling. Now he was drowning in debt to loan sharks. Steven had found the woman and told her all about my current situation. But I didn't have time to deal with Steven right now, because they had latched onto me like leeches. 10 million. We just need $10 million. You spend that much on a bracelet. It's nothing to you, Aaron. I've got plenty of money, but why the hell would I give any to you? The person on the other end of the line started crying again. "I'm your mother. I gave birth to you. We're homeless now. Are you just going to stand by and watch me die? He's the one in debt, not you. And I'm not stupid. His gambling problem is his problem. What does it have to do with you? And what does it have to do with me?" I couldn't be bothered to argue anymore and blocked the number. But it wasn't long before another call came through, a video call this time. The man on the screen's face was swollen like a pig's head. He was in a basement, and on a bed not far away, a woman lay bruised and battered. The man was the construction boss, Rick. The loan sharks had found them. This time it was just a warning. I like to think of myself as a cold, heartless person, but seeing that, I couldn't bring myself to be completely ruthless. "I can give you the money, but on one condition: you divorce her. Once you're hooked on gambling, you don't just quit. This would happen again and again and again." Rick hesitated, but in the end, he agreed. I didn't want anyone else to know about this, especially not the Shepherds or Julian. So obviously, I couldn't use their money. I sold a few of my own cars to scrape together the cash. To make sure Rick didn't back out, I took the money and the divorce papers and went to meet them myself. My plan was to have him sign the papers, grab the stupid woman, and get out of there, leaving the rest of the mess behind. But I never expected that as soon as Rick got the money, his whole demeanor would change. I saw things were going south and tried to drag the stupid woman out of there. But then, she grabbed an ashtray from the table behind me and brought it down hard on my head. Blood gushed out, blurring my vision. Why? The woman was panicking, wringing her hands, just repeating I'm sorry over and over. Rick kicked me to the ground and sneered. Why? Because you, Mr. Shepard, are worth a lot more than $10 million. Don't waste your breath. The Shepard family already found their real son. They're not going to pay a ransom for you. If you had half a brain, you'd be negotiating with me. My life is the only thing I care about. My head was throbbing. Through my blurry vision, I heard a loud bang as the door was kicked open. Who says? It was Julian's voice. Then a flood of well-trained foreign bodyguards poured in. The small basement was suddenly packed. Rick was subdued in an instant. A man in a sharp suit walked towards me and lifted me into his arms. Your husband cares, too. You've got a million tricks up your sleeve when you're dealing with me. What? Did you use up all your street smarts on me? At the hospital, a nurse was bandaging my forehead while Julian stood by, his face grim. He's usually such a sly fox, so his earlier ferocity had really startled me. He'd been about to carry me out, but when he saw me whimpering in pain, my eyes glued shut with blood. He'd grabbed a steel pipe from the corner and smashed it straight into Rick's hand. I heard a sickening squelch of flesh and bone, and then he said coldly, "The woman, take her to the police station. The man, beat him up, then take him to the police station." After the nurse left, Julian was still fuming. I tugged on his sleeve and tried to explain. This was my fault, I was careless. Next time something like this happens, I'll hire 17 or 18 bodyguards too. They looked pretty intimidating all standing together like that. The words were barely out of my mouth when Julian leaned down. He looked like he wanted to flick my forehead, but seeing the fresh wound, he settled for pinching my cheek instead. Are you trying to kill me with worry? Julian pulled out my phone and handed it to me, his voice cold. If you don't want me to put a tracker on you, you will immediately set my number as your emergency contact. Also, memorize my phone number. You're reciting it to me tonight. I've already memorized it. I can recite it for you right now. I raised an eyebrow, motioning for him to lean in. He scoffed, clearly not believing me, but he obediently leaned closer. Julian, listen carefully, I said. It was mortifying, but I pinched his ear and whispered, I think I like you a little bit. Julian froze, his face still stern, but the corners of his mouth twitched into a smile. He suddenly leaned in and kissed me, then asked with a straight face, how about now? A little bit more? Nope. You just took advantage of me without my permission. The little bit is gone. It wasn't a serious injury, but Julian insisted I stay in the hospital for a few days for observation. It wasn't until the day I was discharged that anyone from the Shepard family showed up. The moment my mother saw me, she started crying. I thought she was worried about me, but then she opened her mouth and started pleading for Stephen. Alex, Stephen didn't mean to do it. He knows he was wrong now. Can you forgive him? Please, can you talk to them? Keep him out of jail? Turned out Stephen was the one who set the gambling trap for Rick. When the whole thing came to light, everyone involved was arrested. I always knew Stephen was a bit dark and played dirty, but I never imagined he could be so vicious. Mom, don't you get it? He conspired with loan sharks to set a trap for Rick. He broke the law. Besides, this has nothing to do with me directly. I'm not the victim, and I don't own the police station. Coming to me is useless. If you have time for this, you'd be better off going to the station and convincing him to cooperate with the investigation. I reached out to steady her, but she slapped my hand away. She was clearly furious and not thinking straight, pointing a finger at me and yelling, Your father told me not to come, that it would be useless. I came here thinking you'd show some gratitude for the years we raised you, but I see you're just an ungrateful brat. I guess it makes sense. You're cruel to your own mother, so why would you be any different with us? My hand hung in the air. I felt helpless. Fine, go ahead and yell. You're not gonna listen to anything I say right now anyway. I'll say it again. You and Dad raised me, and I owe you for that. But I don't owe him anything. And even if my forgiveness could help him, which it can't, I wouldn't give it. After that day, the Shepherds never came to see me again. I heard they were pulling strings everywhere, but Stephen still went to prison. It wasn't for long. Since he didn't do it for profit, he only got 2 years, but it was enough to teach him a lesson. That night, I was watching a TV show when my alarm went off. I checked my phone. It was 10 o'clock. So, I picked up my phone and called Julian, who was out at a business dinner. Before I could even speak, I heard Julian's muffled voice on the other end. My apologies, everyone. My husband is calling. Then, his voice softened as he spoke into the phone. What's wrong? Baby? What's wrong? This was the damn mission you assigned me. I have no idea what got into Julian, but ever since he came home in the middle of the night from a long schmooze fest with clients to find me fast asleep, he'd been pissed with a capital P. He chewed on my neck and then gave himself a curfew. If he wasn't home by 10, I had to call and tell him to come home. I couldn't resist his wheedling, so I always played along. Honey, I had Mrs. Davis make you soup. It's getting cold. Why aren't you home yet? Julian paused, then slowly asked, It is getting a little late. I'll be home soon. Wait, Mrs. Davis? Who the hell is Mrs. Davis? I ignored him, taking a sip of my wine and continuing my performance. I knew it. We're just in a marriage of convenience. In your heart, I'm just his replacement. Do you know how cold it is to be home alone? There are 326 tiles on my floor. I've touched every single one of them countless times. 31 of them already have tiny cracks. See? What does it matter that I love you? You have so many people who love you. You don't need my love. You just ignore it. So cold and distant. I was watching the TV, really getting into my role, and didn't notice that while the person on the other end of the line was silent, the background noise had changed several times, until I heard a car pull into the driveway. The door slammed open, and a travel-worn man walked in. Why you? How did you get back so fast? The soap opera was still playing on the TV. I jumped, scrambling off the couch to find the remote and turn it off. When I turned back, Julian was already sitting on the sofa, flipping through the book I had grabbed at random, The Stand-in's Revenge, a contract marriage love story. Julian's eyelids were lowered. After a long moment, he finally shifted his gaze to me and answered my question. I have a beautiful husband at home. The invitation was too tempting to refuse. Oh, shut up. I hate men with no ambition. You come running home after one phone call? Pathetic. I mumbled, trying to snatch the book back when he wasn't looking, but Julian saw right through me. He gave a slight tug. I missed the book and tumbled right into his lap. Damn it! I tried to get up, but a strong hand on my waist held me firmly in place. I heard the man's laughter in my ear, tinged with a casual nonchalance. This move, throwing yourself at me, is one I find very hard to resist. Screw you. I was always the one doing the teasing. Julian had embarrassed me like this time and time again. Gritting my teeth, I pushed back with all my strength, pinning him down and straddling him. To my surprise, Julian didn't fight back. He just raised his hands lazily and arched an eyebrow. My, you're strong. So what now? Am I at your mercy? The scene felt just like that night in the garden at the party. Back then, it was just a one-night stand. Who would have thought that I, Alex Shepard, the man who fluttered through 1,000 flowers without a single petal sticking, would fall for Julian? Someone once said that you'd get bored of me once I fell for you. Well, I think I like you quite a bit now. What do you have to say to that? I pinned Julian's hands down, keeping them still, and deliberately started to tease him. Julian's long lashes fluttered down. He lowered his head, used his teeth to undo the top button of my shirt, and licked his lips, his voice husky. Then show me just how much you like me. His gaze moved from my eyes to my lips, filled with a raw, intense desire. Just looking at me like that was enough to make my body go weak. I swallowed hard, then bit down on his bobbing Adam's apple. Julian, have we met before? You guess. I had a pretty good idea of the answer. I mimicked his earlier move, tilting his chin up. If you don't tell me, I'm gonna fuck you to death tonight. I'd be delighted. Extra Julian's perspective. Before I was 14, I was definitely only into girls. Then, I met a little chatterbox who was a bit too friendly. Probably because I was intellectually miles ahead of kids my age, I didn't really enjoy spending time with them. But that little guy thought I was being bullied and ostracized by everyone else. He probably had never heard of the Julian family, let alone me. He just stopped me on my way home from school one day and insisted on teaching me how to fight back against bullies. I knew who he was, the kid the Shepherd family had adopted from the orphanage. His background should have made him an easy target at our school, but surprisingly, it didn't. His logic was, to stop people from bullying me, I bullied everyone else first. He taught me how to cultivate a don't mess with me persona, how to shoulder check someone back if they bumped into you, and how to escape if you were cornered by a group. He had an endless supply of jokes, complaints, and crushes. It was then that I learned that boys could like other boys. He said he was just born that way. At first, I just thought he was amusing. But I don't know when it started, my eyes just kept finding their way to him. It wasn't until I was about to leave for a foreign country, for years, maybe even more than a decade, that I realized I might like boys too. I left him a letter. I wanted to see him one last time before I left, and I included my address abroad. But I waited a whole day and night, and he never came. He never came to see me, and he never sent me a single letter. I thought it was just a small chapter from my youth. I never expected that every man I was attracted to after that would have a shadow of him. When we grew up, I heard things about him. He hadn't changed much from when he was a kid. Still had an endless supply of crushes. Still just as heartless. I never thought he'd come looking for trouble with me again. Fine. We'll settle old and new scores all at once. Chris actually teased me, asking if I hadn't gotten over him and wanted to rekindle things. What a joke. I would not be fooled by him again. I only married him for revenge. I have my own plan. The best way to get revenge on someone is to keep them firmly by your side. Yes, that's right. That's exactly it.